This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. At this moment, a huge wave was set off in Madame G's heart. She had mixed feelings, as if she had knocked over a seasoning. She was even more regretful. If she had known that this man was a martial sovereign of the 9 heavens, she would have done everything she could to save him. If their Chamber of Commerce could have a martial sovereign from the 9 heavens as their leader, not only would the strength of the Chamber of Commerce increase in quality, but even the Xian family would not dare to bully them so brazenly. Madame G gave Yunxiao a complicated look, then turned her eyes to Ziling. She finally understood that Yunxiao must not want Ziling to be humiliated, so he would rather offend the Xian family to come out. As for the wooden frame on his head, she also thought it was because he was afraid of being recognized by the Xian family and being retaliated against in the future. Madame G immediately had a plan in her heart. After this matter was over, she must play the card of Ziling and build a good relationship with the martial sovereign of the 9 heavens. With a martial emperor in charge, although they could not fight against the Xian family, they would at least have the power to protect themselves. Any martial emperor powerhouse was the absolute main force of a sect and they could not afford to lose them. Therefore, very few people dared to declare war on martial emperors easily, unless it was a place like the 7 major forces where martial emperors were everywhere. As expected, Xian Tongting's expression was dark and uncertain. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "What is your relationship with Ink Feather Merchant Association?" He actually tried to kill a member of my Xian family. I'm afraid this matter will be very difficult to settle. Yunxiao said in the same half-dead tone, "What's so difficult about killing him?" So what if he's killed? Xian Tongtong snorted coldly. He said it so easily. If you can't give the Xian family an explanation, you will be hunted down by the Xian family's martial emperor powerhouses. The dead can't be resurrected, Yunxiao said. What should we do then? Only then did Xian Tongting's expression ease a little. He said, "Indeed, the dead can't be resurrected, and they had their own reasons for their deaths. They couldn't see through your strength and attacked a martial sovereign of the 9th heaven, so they deserved it. However, our Xian family can't let them die in vain, or else everyone's hearts will be chilled. How about this, as long as you're willing to join my Xian family and become our guest elder, then we'll forget about today's matter." With a wave of his hand, he exuded an extremely domineering aura. The lives of those martial honors were also settled just like that. Madame G was very nervous, fearing that Yunxiao would agree to the other party's conditions just like that, and her plan would fall through. Besides, no matter how she looked at it, joining the Xian family was an extremely good choice. A martial supreme who had been cut in two but was still alive crawled over with his upper body and said in a trembling voice, young master, help us, help us." Xian Tongtong bent down, his face full of pity as he sighed, "It's not that I don't want to make a decision for you, but the dead can't come back to life. Since you're dead, everything should be empty. Just die properly. What's the point of thinking so much? Even if I avenge you, you won't be able to come back to life." The remaining half of the martial honor's body immediately widened his eyes and died, unable to rest in peace. "Not interested," Yunxiao said. Xian Tongting's expression suddenly changed and he said coldly, "It seems like you're going to walk this path to the end. How do you plan on giving me an explanation for today's matter?" "Kill them," Yunxiao said. "I'll give you an explanation. If you still want an explanation, I'll kill you too." Everyone was taken aback, and their expressions changed drastically. They didn't think that this brat would actually dare to say such harsh words. Even a 9 heavens martial sovereign would not dare to speak to the young master of the Xian family in this manner in Long Valley City. Xian Tongting's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. He knew that he could no longer use this person. A murderous intent flashed through his eyes, and he said coldly, "Kill." The 2 experts behind him immediately released their auras. The people around them immediately felt an extremely strong pressure. Those with weaker cultivation even spat out blood on the spot. Ziling and the 4 maidservants were the same. It was as if their chests were hit by a hammer. They spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. A martial sovereign of the 9 heavens. The crowd watched in horror. A battle between martial supremes was about to take place. They were all fearful, afraid that they would be affected. Xian Tongtong also stood up from his throne at this moment. He walked down step by step and said ferociously, "It just so happens that I've just entered the martial emperor realm and I've never fought with anyone before. You're the first." As the 3 martial sovereigns slowly walked toward Yun Shao, the faces of the people from Ink Feather Chamber of Commerce turned uglier than pig liver, and they cried out in their hearts that they were in trouble. Madame Ji was also very anxious. She kept looking into the distance, hoping that Uncle Nan would appear in time. When Yun Shao saw that Ziling was injured and sent flying by the other party's aura, he said in a cold voice, "Die." He pointed his finger in the air, and 3 Northern Heaven Cold Star swords appeared on his right arm. They turned into 3 sword wills and slashed in the air. Xian Tongtong and the other 2 were full of confidence. After all, they were fighting 3 against 1, and it was almost a sure win. When they saw the other party striking 3 swords with 1 move, trying to fight 1 against 3, they sneered in their hearts and summoned their profound weapons to meet the attack. Bang! 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 The sound of 3 weapons clashing could be heard. Soon after, Xian Tongtong and the other 2 stood still in their original positions. Their bodies maintained their battle stances, but their eyes were filled with endless fear. "You." Xian Tongtong squeezed out a few words from his throat. He could not believe that his opponent had not only taken on 3 people at once, but had also only used 1 move. He could not believe that he would die, and that he would die in Long Valley City. Then, Xian Tongtong lost all signs of life and fell to the ground dead. The other 2 martial emperor powerhouses also fell to the ground and died. This scene immediately caused everyone to be completely dumbfounded. Their minds were buzzing, and they found it difficult to understand what they were seeing. Madame Ji was completely dumbfounded. She had thought that she would see an earth-shattering battle, and all the buildings in the area would be destroyed. Then, Yun Shao would be defeated by the 3 of them, and Uncle Nan would come to mediate at the critical moment. But who knew that in just a moment, 3 powerful martial sovereigns of the 9 heavens realm would die? A ray of light flew over from the distance, and 3 figures arrived in an instant. One of them was Uncle Nan. Before he landed, he shouted, "Second young master, please show mercy." The other 2 were also 7th-tier alchemists, and both of them enjoyed a great reputation in the Long Valley, and they had a good relationship with the Xian family. Uncle Nan knew how perverted and tyrannical Xian Tongtong was. He was afraid that the other party wouldn't give him face, so he immediately pulled 2 more people together to make me bigger. As soon as the 3 of them landed, they saw the corpses on the ground. Uncle Nan's heart immediately sank. It was only when he saw Madame Ji that he heaved a sigh of relief. He was not late. And although Zidi was heavily injured, suppressed by the 2 powerful cultivators to the point that she could not move, but with his eyes, he could tell that it was just an external injury, and it would be easy to recover. "Madam, are you all right?" After Uncle Nan asked with concern, he looked around and said, "Where is second young master Xian?" No one said a word. Madame Ji was also stunned. Even though she had been in the business world for a long time, she still couldn't recover from the shock of the situation. He gave Yun Shao a deep look and said, "Uncle Nan, Xian Tongtong is already dead." "Yes, he's dead." Uncle Nan asked in surprise. Then, he suddenly jumped up in shock and said anxiously, "What? What did you just say?" "He's dead." "Who's dead?" He took a deep breath and pointed to the body on the ground. "Uncle Nan, look for yourself. The second young master of the Xian family, Xian Tongtong, is dead." Uncle Nan and the other 2 7th-tier alchemists gasped in shock. They hurried forward to flip over the body that Zidi had pointed at. It was indeed Xian Tongtong, and he had been killed in 1 strike. Who killed him? Uncle Nan felt a chill run down his spine. The death of the second young master of the Xian family was an earth-shattering event in Long Valley City, and it had already developed to a point where he, a mere 7th-tier alchemist, could not mediate. He killed him. A warrior from Ink Feather Merchant Association gave Yunxiao a trembling look, but he did not dare to raise his hand to point at the other man. Uncle Nan and the other 2 7th-tier alchemists immediately understood what was going on, and they walked forward with solemn expressions. Uncle Nan breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. As long as it was not the doing of Ink Feather Trade Union, there was still a glimmer of hope that he and his mother could be saved. He cupped his hands at Yunxiao and said, "I'm Nan Liu, a 7th-tier alchemist. May I know your name?" They had already seen Xian Tongting's injuries. He had been killed in one move. The person who could kill Xian Tongtong in one move was definitely a martial emperor expert. In that case, he could not be a nobody. The 3 of them also found it very strange, wondering why Yunxiao had covered his face with a wooden frame. If he was afraid of being hunted down by the Xian family, he should not have killed the second young master of the Xian family. Yunxiao ignored their questions and walked straight to Ziling. "Are you alright?" Uncle Nan looked embarrassed, but the other party was a martial emperor. He could not do anything if the other party ignored him. This series of changes had brought Ziling back to her senses from the great pain and humiliation she had suffered earlier. At this moment, she finally confirmed that Yunxiao was the ugly man, so she said in a hurry, "I'm fine. Thank you." "All right." Yunxiao nodded. "It's good that you're fine." He turned around to leave. Madame Ji panicked and hurriedly said, "Sir, you can't leave." Yunxiao was too lazy to bother with her, and with just a few steps, he was 100 meters away. Madame Ji was anxious and shouted, "Sir, if you leave now, the Xian family will take revenge on us. Please save us." She no longer had any intention of recruiting him. If she killed Xian Tongtong, she would die without a doubt. What she was most afraid of now was that the Xian family would involve the Ink Feather Chamber of Commerce in their anger. Moreover, judging from the way the Xian family did things, it was almost inevitable. She hoped that Yunxiao would stay and bear the Xian family's anger. Uncle Nan was also anxious. The second young master of the Xian family had died, and it was no longer something he could resolve. Ziling also shouted anxiously, "Please save Ink Feather Trade Union. I can't repay you." "Thank you." She was about to kneel down in front of Yunxiao. Ziling also understood the key point. She knew that the only person who could save Ink Feather Trade Union was this mysterious man in front of her. She knelt down, but the moment her knees touched the ground, she was blocked by a force and bounced up, unable to kneel. At some point, Yunxiao had come in front of her from 100 miles away and said indifferently, "Get up. Since you've spoken, I'll kill the entire Xian family to prevent any future trouble." Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. They were shocked and thought they had heard wrong. Madame Ji was also horrified. She had hoped that Yunxiao would stay because she hoped that he could find a way to solve the matter, so that the Xian family would not vent their anger on her. As for annihilating the Xian family, she did not even dare to think about it. However, the man in front of them did not seem to be exaggerating. It was a pity that his head was covered with a wooden frame, so no one could see his true appearance and expression. Uncle Nan was also shocked. "This young master's words are too shocking," he said awkwardly. "The Xian family is one of the 2 major forces in Long Valley City. They have been in power for generations." Yunxiao interrupted him and said, "Where is the Xian family? Point me in the right direction." Everyone looked at each other and felt that it was a little unreal. He really went to the Xian family. Was there something wrong with this person's brain? No wonder he had a wooden frame to cover his head. "Young man, it's rare to have some skills, but it's easy to be arrogant and put yourself in danger. I advise you to run away." A middle-aged man in the crowd suddenly said slowly. He seemed to value the talent. When Uncle Nan saw the man, he immediately exclaimed, "So it's Lord Shui Xingqiao." The Shui family was another super force in Long Valley City, and they ruled the city together with the Xian family. The matter here had long alarmed the entire city, and the Shui family also had many spies observing the surroundings. It's great that Lord Xing is here, Uncle Nan said hurriedly. I hope that you can bear witness to this. You have no intention of becoming enemies with the Xian family. Xian Tongtong died because of you. Does it matter if you have any enmity? Shui Xingchao's words immediately made Uncle Nan and all the people of Ink Feather Merchant Association feel like they had fallen into an abyss. That's right, the second young master was already dead. Even if there was nothing to do with it, with the Xian family's ruthless style of doing things, there was no way they would let him off. Despair appeared in Madame G's eyes. She couldn't stand still and her body was on the verge of collapse. The Chamber of Commerce that she had worked so hard to build for so many years was going to be destroyed. Shui Xingchao threw out an invitation and said to Yun Shao, "Young man, I can see that your cultivation should be at the level of a 2-star martial emperor, and what's more, you're very young. Today's matter can be said to have pierced through the sky. However, if you're willing to join my Shui family as a guest elder, I can take on the responsibility for you and ensure the safety of Ink Feather Merchant Association." Shui Xingchao's words immediately ignited the hope of the entire Ink Feather Merchant Association. At this moment, only the Shui family could save them. Although Xian Tongteng's death would bring him great trouble, Shui Xingchao felt that Yunxiao's potential was worth the price. "My lord, please save us." Ziling also pleaded. She also found that Yunxiao did not care about anyone, but he listened to her a little. It should be to repay her for saving him. Sure enough, Yunxiao seemed to only talk to her. He said indifferently, "Don't worry, I will settle this matter cleanly. Tell me how to get to the Xian family." Everyone was stunned. This brat was really stubborn. He really wanted to go to the Xian family to kill people. Wasn't this simply sending himself to his death? Shui Xingchao also felt an inexplicable anger. He had the heart to cherish talents, but the other party ignored him. Such contempt immediately made him feel ashamed. After all, he was an important figure in Long Valley City. He immediately sneered, good, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I'd like to see how you die today." He flicked his sleeve and stood aside coldly, watching the end of Yunxiao and Ink Feather Trade Union with a sneer. The people of Ink Feather Merchant Association were deeply worried when they saw that Shui Xingchao was angry. They didn't know how to solve the mess of the Xian family, and now they had angered the Shui family. Ziling stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. She couldn't point the way, and she couldn't not point the way. She could only turn to Madame G for help. A dark cloud suddenly appeared in the sky, rolling over and immediately covering the bright sky. A cold voice pierced through the clouds and said, "There's no need for your excellency to come. My Xian family's people have delivered themselves to your door for you to kill." Although Long Valley City was large, the Xian and Shui families had ears all over the city. The news of Xian Tongting's death was immediately sent back to the two families. Xian Zhuren, the patriarch of the Xian family, was stunned for a moment before he flew into a rage. He counted the experts and swept over. For a moment, the sky was sealed by an invisible qi. The people of Ink Feather Trade Union looked desperate. The murderous aura in the sky made it hard for them to breathe. Yunxiao raised his head slightly, and the crowd only saw the wooden frame tilt up. "Now you regret it, but it's too late to leave." Many martial artists were trembling under this pressure, almost kneeling down. "Is everyone here?" Yunxiao asked. Everyone was sweating profusely, and the atmosphere of fear had faded a lot. "Humph. As expected, you're a damned piece of trash." Dozens of figures gradually appeared in the sky. The leader's eyes were like a tiger's, and two extremely sharp rays of light stared down. When he saw his son's body on the ground, he immediately wailed, "My son, you've died so miserably." No matter who it was, the death of their son would not be good, even if it was a hero. Xianzhuren's grief-stricken appearance turned into a monstrous anger, and the clouds in the sky seemed to be on fire. Shui Xingchao's face slightly changed, and he retreated 100 meters away, afraid that he would be affected by the Xian family's anger. Since Yun Xiao did not appreciate his kindness, there was no need for him to get involved. I heard that your son is unpardonable, Yun Xiao said. He has tortured and killed at least 8,000 innocent girls. Doesn't he deserve to die? Behind Xianzuan, a man who also looked like a toad walked up and coldly shouted, "It's their fortune to die in my second brother's favor. My second brother was kind and blessed everyone, but he ended up in such a tragic death. It's not too much even if I cut you into 1,000 pieces." Yun Xiao. He had always felt that he was a scoundrel and a ruffian, but today he realized that he was actually a gentleman. Young Master Xian's words were very funny, but no one dared to laugh. They all had serious expressions. A smug smile appeared on young Master Xian's face. There was no trace of sorrow on his face at all. The relationship between the children of great families was extremely cold. Let me avenge my poor brother. A long sword appeared in his hand. After unsealing it, it immediately transformed into a giant and came down from the sky with a shout. With a tap of his foot, he stepped directly on the sword and followed it down. His hands formed a seal and he pressed it out at the same time. Xian Tongting's death was definitely a great thing for him, especially when it was rumored that Xian Tongtong had advanced to the rank of Marshal Supreme, which made his bedroom even more uneasy. At this moment, he was very grateful to Yun Xiao, but he also needed Yun Xiao's head to win his father's favor. A hammer gradually materialized in Yun Xiao's hand, growing larger and larger. Bolts of lightning crackled on it as he threw it out. All the martial emperor powerhouses' pupils constricted and their hearts jolted. The immense pressure from the hammer made them extremely shocked. A line of Maha-ancient text appeared on the hammer, and it immediately smashed down on the huge sword. Young Master Xian suddenly realized that he had brought disaster upon himself. In an instant, he felt as if there was nothing else left in the world other than this hammer. And he would be a grasshopper under this shocking hammer. No. Please spare me. Young Master Xian didn't use all his strength to defend, but instead, he used all his strength to beg for mercy. Bang. The huge hammer smashed down from the sky, and young Master Xian's screams were drowned out by the sound of thunder. After a flash of lightning, a completely black human charcoal fell to the ground. His sword had also been smashed out of shape, and it fell beside him like a piece of scrap metal. This sudden turn of events stunned everyone, and they all stood there with their mouths wide open. GZD's body trembled. He had participated in the joust for a spouse event in the Red Moon City, so he immediately recognized the hammer. He was so shocked that his face turned pale. He immediately understood who the person in front of him was. He was so excited that his face turned red, and he even started to dance. Madame G was shocked. She thought her son had gone crazy, so she quickly pulled him aside. I'm furious. Damn it, my son. Xianzuan was suddenly shocked and roared in rage. The killing intent on his body was about to burst as he repeatedly shouted, kill them all. Yun Xiao caught the hammer that fell back into his hand and said indifferently, good, I don't have the time to kill them one by one. The faces of all the martial artists in the street changed as they fled in all directions in horror. The lowest cultivation level among the martial artists who had come to kill them was a martial supreme. Yun Xiao performed an incantation gesture with one hand, and streams of sword intent shot out of his body and took the shape of swords around him. The million sword illustration appeared in the sky above him. 9 northern heaven cold star swords were formed, exuding a terrifying sword intent that enveloped all the martial artists in the sky. This is. In the distance, Shui Xingqiao sucked in a breath of cold air and was extremely shocked. Many martial artists who had been to the Red Moon City were stunned for a moment, but they immediately recognized the sword force and were shocked. It's him, it's really him. GZD was so excited that he couldn't control himself. He kept muttering to himself, and his eyes were shining with admiration. After recovering from her shock, Madame G frowned and said, who is it? My son, do you know who he is? Li Yunxiao. GZD said excitedly. He's the #1 rising star, the one who made a name for himself in the battle in Red Moon City and defeated the king of the Sea tribe. Everyone was shocked by his words.